So we are now recording this session. On Tuesday, we began with talking about methodologies, and we looked at the grammar translation method, and we looked at the direct method. Let me just get this set up as the slideshow so you can see it a little bit better. There we go. So with the grammar translation method, can you tell me a little bit about what you remember about the grammar translation method, Bushra?
Yes, for sure. Sir, you told us about grammar translation method, and there are two kinds of method. That was direct method, that was indirect method. And you also talk about culture, acculturation, cultural preservation. And then you told about in grammar translation, it is written form, exercises form, drills, no speaking. And in direct method, child learns the first language spontaneously. And then you told about grammar taught induction, learning through experiences. Then you told about Berlitz's method and direct method.
That's right.
So
And the direct method and the Berlitz method are
it's
really
the
the
same.
same. They're really
Yes.
the same thing. And what is it? What is special about the direct method?
So direct method is like that you have to speak English with the kids and just give the exposure to them like the first language. Introduce English like the first language, and it is not concerned about the grammatical errors, but it is just like you are speaking English no matter what comes in your mind. And indirect method was like that you more grammar translation method is like you more focused on the grammatical things, you more focused on the writing thing. It is all about writing base, it is not about the speaking base. That I
That's
told
right.
you that. Yes, sir.
The grammar translation method is more about the writing and the reading of another language. That's exactly correct. So that was a good little review of what we did on Tuesday. Thank you very much for that, Bushra.
Thank you so much, sir, that's very kind of you.
And tonight we're going to move on and talk about audiolingual method. Notional
Okay.
Functional Syllabus, NFS, stands for Notional Functional Syllabus, and the Communicative Language Teaching, CLT. We're going to be focusing on those three tonight. But first, I'm just going to end this slideshow, and we're going to have a look at a couple of other items first before we come back to that PowerPoint and look at those other things. Hello, Kendra. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for hosting this class. I was wondering, is it too late to sign up? Because I know you've already had 3 sessions.
So you want to sign up and to take the course?
Yes, sir.
You can send an email to TESOL and ask for information about doing that, and I'll put the email address in the chat box for you.
I know that the first 2 lessons were recorded, and then last night I showed up at 8:30 and the class was over. And so I just know that it said after 3 classes, not, being missed, it said something about not be able to take the course, but this would be that was 3 but not more than 3, so I don't know. And then also the first 2 are recorded, which I'll look over, so I don't know if that really counts.
Well, you can review those recordings,
Yes.
and that's fine. So I'm just putting the email in the address box here for you, the chat box.
Thank you.
So you should email to Simon Baker.
Okay.
I think I spelled everything correctly there. Simon Baker is the gentleman who you would email to. He's in charge of the administration.
Okay. I mean, it shouldn't be an issue. And I saw how to sign up online. When is the $300 due for registration? Whenever before the exam?
Well, you can ask him all those questions. He deals with all that information. So
Okay,
you
thank you.
can ask him all of those questions. Okay?
Okay, thank
You're welcome. So we're going to move to another PowerPoint and just talk a little bit about second language acquisition. Just get this set up as a slideshow so you can see it more clearly. Second language acquisition, all this information that I've got in this PowerPoint is taken from the material is taken from the Canvas platform. So you will be seeing this information when you're reading through the Canvas platform. So classical conditioning, this is connected to the grammar translation method, and which is also known as the classical method. But classical conditioning is the process of learning which is understood as an observable change in performance on the part of an individual. If a learner does not change their performance, then they're not really learning the material in a helpful manner. So this is brought about in two distinct ways, either of which involves the mechanisms of stimulus and response. Creative learning is where learners bring to the learning process their creative ability to perceive and detect relationships and to recognize analogies and contrasts. That understanding of a new language that is being learned is an indication of how extensively the individual has applied this observable change in performance in their learning process. When somebody is able to identify and perceive and detect relationships within the language itself, between parts of language, and recognize analogies and contrasts in the new language, that means that they are really learning the language. They are interactive, influencing the environment, and conscious of at least a part of the process of language acquisition. A living language is one that the student learns to think in. So if you think in the English language and you speak in the English language based on what you're thinking, then it is a living language for you. If English is not your first language, your native language, your mother tongue, if you think in your mother tongue, the native language that you learned as a child, if you think in that native language and translate that in your mind and then speak in English, then English is not a living language for you. The words that we know.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Can I have a question, please?
Yes.
Sir, I have read somewhere that whatever you think, whatever in your mind, whatever you plan in your mind, basically you do it in your mother language. That is your mother tongue. But if you are talking us about a living language, how we gonna improve? How, matlab, it means that how we gonna convert ourselves into that phase that we will think everything in English. Because I have read somewhere that whatever comes in your mind, whatever you plan in your life, you automatically do it in your mother tongue, in your mother language. So isn't it difficult to convert yourself that you are thinking at a point that where English will become your living language?
I understand what you're saying, but the living language means that when you are having a conversation with somebody, you're thinking in English as you're speaking in English.
All right.
So when you were describing what you just told me about, you were not thinking in your native tongue and then translating into English. You were thinking in English and speaking
All
in
right.
English at the same time. So that tells me that it's a living language for you.
All right, sir. Thank you so much. Thank
Does
you.
that make sense?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Because somewhere I have read that when a person is all alone sitting, and thinking about his plans or thinking about his personal life, whatever comes in that mind, that will be in the always in the first language. That is always will be the first language. It will never be the second language. For example, if I'm sitting alone and thinking about what will be my priorities, where I watch myself after 5 years, these all plans will automatically be in my first language.
I understand what you're saying, but as time goes on and you become more familiar with the English language, you will find that you will think in the English language more frequently.
All right, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you.
And the words in any language, the words we know allow us to represent nonverbal concepts and to deal abstractly with experiences. So
All
that's where
right, sir.
practicing in a new language is very important so that we can achieve this level of understanding of that new language, the target language. There are two types of motivation for learning a language. Actually, these two types of motivation apply to anything we do. Intrinsic motivation is an internal desire to learn, the personal growth and self-improvement. So things that we decide to do that we really want to do them because we want to learn about them for personal growth and self-improvement, that is an intrinsic motivation. Extrinsic motivation comes from an external requirement. Perhaps an employer is requiring somebody to learn a second language in order to improve business dealings that they have with other people. So those are the two different types of motivation. You'll come across these described and discussed in the Canvas platform, different spots throughout the Canvas platform modules. Noam Chomsky, as I mentioned last week, at the beginning of the second language acquisition module, beginning of that lesson in the Canvas platform, there's an excellent video of Noam Chomsky discussing his theories of language acquisition at a university lecture. And you should definitely listen to that video and watch that video. It's very, very good. It's about an hour long. I watched it several times because I was so fascinated by it. But it definitely has some valuable information in it. He was
Sir,
an
please
American.
send us a link in the chat.
Well, it's in the Canvas platform. It's
All
under
right.
the second language acquisition module.
All right, sir. Thank you.
So if you
So
go down,
I'm
scroll
so
down,
sorry.
that's
I'm so
okay.
sorry.
I'll show you where it is in a few moments. It's under the second language acquisition, under that heading. So I don't need to send you a link because you've got the Canvas platform. So he was an American linguistic philosopher, cognitive scientist, and a historian, a major figure in analytic philosophy and one of the founders of cognitive science. He played a pivotal role in the decline of linguistic behaviorism and was particularly critical of B.F. Skinner. Noam Chomsky developed a theory of language learning, which he called language acquisition device. This was based on the fact that Noam Chomsky says we are all born with a language acquisition device in our brains already. Our brains are programmed when we're born to have linguistic processing skills as existing knowledge. And he says we're born with that, and as little babies, very young children, we hear the linguistic input from people around us that feeds into that language acquisition device, which then generates the theory of language, the phonology, morphology, semantics, and syntax that come out in the speech of the young child. And all this determines the child's grammatical competence, comprehension of other people's speech, and the speech production of the young child. So Noam Chomsky was a very, very big believer and did a lot of research connected with this theory over the decades from the 1960s onward. This is just another diagram to describe the same process of Chomsky. So the mechanism of this innate theory is that the language acquisition formulates from the innate process that is already in our brains. The primary linguistic data, the adult speech, is the input that we hear from other adults as young children. We're listening to other adults around us. And this provides us with general language learning principles, because we hear adults as young children. When we're 1 or 2 years old, we hear the adults in our world speaking, and we begin to develop an understanding of the general language process and the principles of putting together a sentence and putting together speech patterns. So then he says that translates in our brains into a development of an understanding of grammatical knowledge and rules, and comes out of the young child as the speech. Then there was Stephen Krashen, and he says second language acquisition develops exclusively through comprehensible input. That is, second language students acquire language competence by exposure to language that is both understandable and meaningful to them. By concentrating on meaning, they subconsciously acquire form. And in a moment, I'll go to the Canvas platform and I'll show you where you can see Noam Chomsky and where you can see Stephen Krashen under the second language module, second language acquisition module. So how would we apply Krashen's theory in the classroom? Use Krashen's ideas about comprehensible input. Between classes, ask your students to watch something, a TV show or a movie, to listen to something, a radio program, or to read something such as a newspaper or a magazine that they can relate to and comprehend. Krashen's ideas, when combined with others that provide form and structure, will enable learning. In 1994, Douglas Brown published a book, English Language Teaching in the Post-Method Era, Toward Better Diagnosis, Treatment, and Assessment. He said we did not need a new method. We needed instead to get on with the business of unifying our approach to language teaching and of designing effective tasks and techniques informed by that approach. Brown's 12 principles are these. I'll just leave this up on the screen for a moment, let you read through this list of his 12 principles. The diagnosis, treatment, and assessment was a principled approach to language teaching, encourages the language teacher to engage in a carefully crafted process of diagnosis, treatment, and assessment. The diagnosis part begins with curricular plans, curriculum, and lesson plans, and continues as an ongoing monitoring process in the classroom. Language curricula call for an initial study of what Richards in 1990 calls situational needs, or the context of the teaching. Situational needs include the country in which the institution exists, the socioeconomic and educational background of the students in the classrooms, specific purposes the students have in learning a language, whether it's intrinsic or extrinsic, and what is their purpose for being there, And also important consideration must be given to the institutional constraints that are imposed on a curriculum. These could be financial restraints. Maybe the school or the school board does not have money to buy textbooks. That would help tremendously. And so that is a constraint, an institutional constraint that is a situational need that has to be addressed somehow by the teacher. The treatment part of this process, think of as courses of study, or better yet, sets of learning experiences designed to target learner needs exposed by diagnostic assessments. So rather than thinking of a big course of study that might last an entire year, break it down into smaller sections, sets of learning experiences that might be 2 to 3 weeks at a time, designed around activities that will help the students learn, because smaller chunks of learning experiences will help the child, help the student to remember the material and remember the knowledge more effectively, more efficiently. There were 38 language teaching techniques categorized by Crooks and Chaudron in 1991. Now, I didn't list all 38 of them here, but these are just some of the key topics. Controlled drills, dialogues, reading aloud, display questions and answers, etc. So which methodology does this relate to? A methodology of teaching a language that has controlled drills and dialogues, reading aloud, questions and answers to do. So there's reading and writing involved mostly here, especially with the drills. Which methodology is this connected to? That would be the grammar translation method. And then there's a semi-controlled aspect, which is referential questions and answers, cued narratives, information gap activities, etc., all the way to free role-playing, problem-solving, interviews, discussions. So you see, this gets away from the grammar translation method because this is more interactive. Consider as well an abundance of whole class, group work, and pair work activities that we have at our disposal. Assessment. The methods of old offered nothing in the way of assessment techniques. So the methods of old, which would be to pass out a test to the students would fill in the blanks or complete the written test and hand it back in, and then that would be marked. But that was not really an effective way of assessing how a student was progressing. Today, the language testing field has mushroomed into a highly developed and sophisticated field with numerous facets. Increased emphasis on ongoing assessment of students' performance as a course progresses, or what has commonly been called formative evaluation. So rather than just having one big test at the end of a section of time, at the end of a semester, or the end of a year, we now have smaller tests along the way, which is the formative evaluation. We gather up a series of marks that are connected to smaller chunks of learning. And this gives us a better assessment, a better understanding of how the child is learning and how that learning is building in the child's experience. With formative processes of assessment in place, the teachers can make appropriate mid-course pedagogical changes to more effectively reach the goals of the curriculum. The notion that evaluation must be confined to summative, end of term, or end of unit tests alone is vanishing. However, it is important to note that summative evaluation is also an important component of a language program. The difference between current summative testing philosophy and the presupposition behind methods that one size fits all can be seen in a wide variety of assessment batteries that cover both production and comprehension skills. A range of assessment tasks, individualized, including computer adaptive tests, and increased attention to the communicative properties of tests. Just want to stop for a moment and explain to you what a computer adaptive test means. So computer adaptive tests are often used in the exam formats for nursing, for instance. I know they're used there, and other areas as well, other disciplines. But a computer adaptive test is one where the question is asked. So a question is asked of the test participant, and based on how they answer the question, the computer will either ask them another question similar that is connected to the first question, or if the student is giving excellent answers and getting all the answers correct for a series of questions, then the computer moves on and chooses a different topic. So the computer adaptive test means that two people, you could have 2 people or 10 people, 20 people sitting in a room writing the same test basically, but each of them is going to be writing a different test because the computer they're working on will adapt to how they're responding to the tests. So that's what a computer adaptive test is. So that's the end of that little slideshow. And we've had a few other people join us. Good to see everybody here. Thank you very much. So as we go through tonight's presentation, I want to finish the slideshows and finish the conversation about the Canvas platform. And if you have any questions, I will answer those questions at the end of our lecture time. So I'll ask you to hold your questions until we get to the end of the session, if you don't mind. Thank you very much. So let me just get my Canvas platform up on the screen here. Just take me a moment. Here's the Canvas platform. So, can you see the Canvas platform now? Good. Thank you.
I have opened it.
Thank you, Kendra. So the Canvas platform is showing for you now. So as you scroll down through these day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4 units of study, those modules, you come to the second language acquisition tab right here. If you go into the second language acquisition tab, this is where you will find the video of Noam Chomsky giving that lecture that I was talking about earlier. So it's right here in the second language acquisition tab. And then down further at the bottom of that page is an excellent video about Stephen Krashen and his hypotheses about language acquisition. So that's where you can find those videos, that information about those two gentlemen. Okay, Bushra, that's why I said I don't need to put the link in the chat box for you, because you've got it on the Canvas platform already. Okay. And it's also on this page where you have your first essay assignment. This is the only place where you're going to see information about this first essay assignment. So under modules,
Excuse me, sir. I'm Shazia Riaz.
under the modules, go to second language acquisition. And if you scroll down this page, that's where you have the information for your first essay, your foundation essay, okay? So you can go to that section on Canvas and you can work away on your essay, and then this gives you the email address to submit it to. Okay?
When's it due?
This first essay is due, I believe, November 20th, the same day as the midterm exam.
Okay, thank you.
And this essay is
Could
only
you
three,
please,
it's only 3 or
could
4
you,
page essay. So don't be writing a 25-page essay or anything for it. It's not a huge long essay. It's a shorter essay. So don't make it any bigger than it really is.
how many pages, sir? 3 to 4 pages essay.
Right. Well, it says 2 to 5 on the Canvas platform, but 3 or 4 pages is usually
Sir?
enough. But you can read it all on the Canvas platform there anyway. Okay. So,
Sir, could you please answer me a question, please?
no, we're going to save all the questions till the end of after the lecture is all finished, Shazia. I'll answer
Okay, sir.
questions at the end of the webinar.
Actually, I wanted to ask about the earlier slides of today's lecture. From where were you discussing all the slides? Are they available on modules on the dashboard?
Well, I'll answer all the questions at the end of the lecture. We're recording the lecture right now, Shazia.
Okay, fine, fine, fine. Thank you.
Right now, we're going to go and look at the audiolingual method, which developed in World War II. So what happened was that grammar translation method and direct method in the 18th, 19th centuries, they were the common methodologies being used by educational institutions. And in the early 20th century, the direct method fell out of favor, primarily because it was a bit more complex than the grammar translation. And it was also a more expensive method. It required smaller classes and therefore more teachers, which meant a more expensive approach for institutions to manage. So then World War II came along. And with World War II, all of a sudden, when the United States became involved in World War II, it became necessary for them to train their military personnel to speak in foreign languages, whether it was a foreign language of one of the ally countries or of the enemy countries. So especially of importance was the fact that if they were sending the military personnel from the United States into enemy territory, those soldiers, those military people needed to be able to speak the foreign language in a very native sounding manner. Because if they didn't sound like a native speaker, then they would be identified as a spy and probably executed. So the Army developed what was known as the audiolingual method, and short form was called the Army method, and it focused on learning the pronunciation of words. They did memorization drills. There was no grammar. They were just simply mimicking, copying the pronunciation of the native speaking teachers that they had. So that was the audiolingual method. And I'm just going to go to the Canvas platform again here for a moment. Because on the Canvas platform, under modules, we see the grammar translation and direct method right there after day 1. And then just after day 2, we see here where you've got the audiolingual and the notional functional syllabus methods, methodologies, as well as communicative language teaching and total physical response. We're focusing on the audiolingual tonight, along with the communicative language teaching and the notional functional syllabus. So As it says here on the Canvas platform, suddenly the United States was thrust into a worldwide conflict. Are you able to read? You able to see the typing, the words all right here? Do you want me to make that a bit bigger? I can enlarge it a little bit, might help. So it was necessary for the American soldiers to become orally proficient in the language of both their allies and their enemies. The time was ripe for language teaching a revolution. The U.S. military provided the impetus for funding specialized intensive language courses that focused on these oral skills. These courses came to be known as the Army Specialized Training Program, ASTP, or more colloquially, more commonly, the Army method. Characteristics of these courses was a great deal of oral activity, pronunciation pattern drills, and conversation practice, with virtually none of the grammar and translation found in traditional classes. Ironically, numerous foundation stones of the discarded direct method were borrowed and injected into this new approach. Soon, the success of the Army method, combined with the revived national interest in foreign languages, spurred educational institutions to adopt the new methodology. In all its variations and adaptations, the Army method came to be known in the 1950s as the audiolingual method. The audiolingual method was firmly grounded in linguistic and psychological theory. Structural linguistics of the 1940s and 1950s were engaged in what they claimed was a scientific descriptive analysis of various languages. Teaching methodologists saw a direct application of such analysis to teaching linguistic patterns. At the same time, behavioristic psychologists advocated conditioning and habit formation models of learning that were perfectly matched with oral drills and pattern practices of audiolingual methodology. The characteristics of the ALM, which is just the short form of audiolingual methodology, the characteristics of the ALM may be summarized in the following list, which is adapted from Praetor and Celsius Murcia. Excuse me. New material is presented in dialogue form. There is dependence on mimicry, memorization of set phrases, and overlearning. Structures are sequenced through contrastive analysis and taught one at a time. Structural patterns are taught using repetitive drills. There's little or no grammatical explanation. Grammar is taught by inductive analogy rather than by reasonable explanation. Inductive analogy means that you learn the grammar by hearing it spoken correctly and by copying that correct speaking, the correct order of words and the correct use of verbs and that type of thing. That's learning inductively. So you learn inductively by doing something rather than writing a lot of exercises about it. The vocabulary is strictly limited and learned in context. There is much use of tapes, language labs, and visual aids. Considerable importance is attached to pronunciation. There's a limited use of the mother tongue by teachers, but it's permitted, but it's very restricted. Successful responses are immediately reinforced. There is a great effort to get students to produce error-free utterances. There is a tendency to manipulate language and disregard content. For some reason, the audiolingual methodology enjoyed many years of popularity, and even to this day, adaptations of the ALM are found in contemporary methodologies. The ALM was firmly rooted in respectable theoretical perspectives at the time. Materials were carefully prepared, tested out, and disseminated to educational institutions. Students could experience success more overtly as they practiced their dialogues in off hours. However, its popularity was not to last forever. We discovered that language was not acquired through a process of habit formation ever over learning. Errors should not be avoided at all costs, and the structural linguistics did not tell us everything about the language that we needed to know. While the audiolingual methodology was a valiant attempt to reap the fruits of languages teaching methodologies that had preceded it, in the end, it still fell short, as all methods do. But we learned something from the very failure of the ALM to do everything it had promised, and we moved forward. The important thing to remember with all of these methodologies is that no one methodology is perfect by itself. It's important to use the best items from a number of methodologies or from many methodologies in your teaching environment. You can pull some valuable items from grammar translation methodology, and you can use written skills to help improve the ability of students when it comes to grammar. But then don't do the entire learning course in the grammar translation method. Also use some audiolingual methodology as well as other items such as the direct method. So by using a variety of the best parts of several different approaches and methodologies, you give a better learning experience to the students in their language learning. And then there was the notional functional syllabus. While the innovative methods of the 1970s were either touted or criticized by many, some paramount foundations for future growth were being laid in what soon came to be known as the Notional Functional Syllabus, or NFS, beginning with the work of the Council of Europe and later followed by numerous interpretations of notional syllabuses. Notional functional syllabuses had started to be used in the United Kingdom in the 1970s. The distinguishing characteristics of the NFS were its attention to functions as the organizing elements of English language curriculum, and its contrast with the structural syllabus in which sequenced grammatical structures served as the organizers. Reacting to methods that attended too vigorously to grammatical form, the NFS sought to focus sharply and in some of its interpretations exclusively on the practical purposes to which we put language. As such, it was not a method at all. It was close to what we have already described as an approach, but it was more specifically focused on curricular structure than an appropriate approach might be. Notions, according to Van Eck and Alexander in 1980, are both general and precise. General notions are abstract concepts such as existence, space, time, quantity, and quality. They are domains in which we use language to express thought and feeling. Within the general notion of space and time, for example, are the concepts of location, motion, dimension, speed, the length of time, frequency, etc. Specific notions correspond more closely to what we have become accustomed to calling contexts or situations. Personal identification, for example, is a specific notion under which name, address, and phone number and other personal information are subsumed. Other specific notions include travel, health and welfare, education, shopping, services, and free time. The functional part of NFS corresponds to language functions. Curricula are organized around such functions as identifying, reporting, denying, accepting, declining, asking permission, apologizing, etc. Van Eck and Alexander in 1980 list some 70 different language functions. The NFS quickly provided social underpinnings for the development of communicative textbooks and materials and English language courses. A manual like Coffey's Fitting in 1982, for example, was organized around the following sequence of functional topics: introductions, greetings, and goodbyes, invitations, apologies, and condolences, gratitude, compliments, congratulations, requests, commands, warnings, directions. You can see how in each of these short lists of 2 or 3 items, the function is similar between them. And so the function became the organizing factor in the NFS methodology. So I'll let you read the rest of that material on your own on the Canvas platform, because I want to move on to the communicative language teaching. By attending to the functional purposes of language and providing contextual or notional settings for the realization of those purposes, it provided a link between a dynasty of methods that were now perishing and a new era of language teaching called communicative language teaching, CLT. When they talk about the dynasty of methods that were perishing, they're talking about all those methodologies that had been around before, such as the grammar, the GTM, the grammar teaching method, the direct method, or the Berlitz method, also known as Berlitz method, the audiolingual, the notional functional syllabus, and all of these led into the communicative language teaching, or CLT, methodology. The communicative language teaching, I like to describe it as being the methodology. It's currently the most widely recognized approach and the accepted norm in the field of language education. And I like to describe the communicative language teaching approach as one that does pull the best items from many other methodologies and approaches before it and pulls them together into one spot, which the student can take full advantage of and reach into different pockets of different approaches from previous eras, previous times. I want to go back to this PowerPoint because it has an excellent comparison chart here. Now you don't need to write this down because you will come across this chart in the Canvas platform, as well as in the some of the documents that are available to you under the resources tab on the Canvas platform. But this compares the audiolingual method with the communicative language teaching. So if we look at a few of these key points, ALM attends to structure and form more than meaning, whereas communicative language teaching is really focusing on the meaning. That's paramount, because the comprehensible pronunciation is sought out here in communicative language teaching, whereas native speaker like pronunciation is the goal with ALM. And in ALM, grammatical explanation is avoided. However, in CLT, any device which helps the learners is accepted, varying according to their age, interest, etc. So there are other factors. You know, you might use the mother tongue as a means of helping a student understand something in the new language, whereas with ALM, you're not allowed to use the native language at all. That's forbidden in the ALM study methodology. So when you come across this chart, you should have a good look at it. And I'm just going to go to the Canvas platform here for a moment and show you where you can find these resources. If you go to the Canvas platform, under modules here, at the beginning of modules, before you actually get into day 1 and day 2 and all those things, before you get there, there's a resources button right here. If you go inside the TESOL resources, I would suggest that you should download the TESOL manual. These are free PDFs. These are here for your use, your benefit. The TESOL Canada Handbook is being worked on and it's being rewritten and updated. So when it does arrive here, download it as well. But download the TESOL manual because it has a lot of very good information in it that you can use to help support your studying and to help with your assignments, your essays, and those types of things. So go to the resources tab under the modules, on the module and on the menu, the main menu under modules, go to this TESOL resources button and specifically download the TESOL manual. And then go back, check back periodically when the TESOL Canada Handbook is available, download it as well. Okay? So right now, are you seeing the Canvas platform or are you seeing the PowerPoint presentation? Can you see the Canvas platform right now?
Yes.
Yes, I can see the Canvas platform.
Okay, that's good. I just wanted to make sure
Yeah.
because the PowerPoint was showing up on my other screen, and I just wanted to make sure that I was showing you the Canvas platform. So the specifics of CLT are that it is learner-centered. It focuses on learner needs and goals, gives some control to the student through group work, for example. It includes the input of students that do not presuppose objectives in advance. It allows for student creativity and innovation, and it enhances a student's sense of competence and self-worth. It is a cooperative approach. The collaborative efforts are very important. Collaboration between the students and collaboration between students and teachers. It is interactive learning. The pair work and group work, the real world contexts, the meaningful communication, the performing classroom tasks, practicing oral communication, and writing to and for real audiences. Communicative language teaching is really like a whole language education approach. The whole language is a label that has been used to describe cooperative learning, student-centered learning, the focus on the community of learners, focus on the social nature of language, the use of authentic natural language, meaning-centered language, and integration of the 4 skills. What are the 4 skills that we're talking about here? Can somebody list those 4 skills for me? Can you name the 4 skills related to language learning?
So reading, writing,
Yes.
speaking, and what else?
Listening.
Listening. Yes.
Very good. Thank you very much. That's it exactly. So additional 21st century methods, which we're not doing right now tonight because you're going to be doing some of these with Alham, Miss Masagi tomorrow night. And then we'll be looking at a few others of these next week as we get into some of the other webinars as well. But there's the total physical response, TPR, total physical response. There's the immersion method, lexical approach, humanistic methodology, learner-centered method. Each of these has its own characteristics, its own benefits, and some of them have benefits, some of them have downfalls because no individual methodology or approach always works all by itself. As I've said a few times already, it's best to pull a few of the best points from several of these approaches and methodologies in order to put together an approach, a methodology that's going to work the very best. And that's exactly what the CLT does. It pulls from all the other approaches and methodologies, it pulls the best items out. And this point right here is very key. Any device which helps the learners is accepted, varying according to their age, interest, etc. So from all of these different methodologies that exist, pull the best points out and use them and apply them, and you have functionally the communicative language teaching approach. There are also other updated 2020 methods known as the outcome-based method. You'll read about that at the University of Hong Kong in 2017. They developed an outcomes-based program for their university students, and all of these other items, all these other styles of approach and methodology that have evolved, and some of them became extremely important as a result of the pandemic that occurred. Social media interactive learning really stepped up. A lot more webinars and online presentations became very, very regular and very normal. With the pandemic and education, schools being closed, doing the Zoom school classes or Skype, doing lessons online became a very common occurrence. There's also MOOC and e-learning, the electronic learning. What does MOOC stand for? Does anybody know what that acronym stands for?
Isn't it massive online? I don't know what the something massive online course.
You're very close. Massive open online course.
Thanks.
Yeah, massive open online course. Open simply meaning that it's open to anybody who wants to take it. So we're going to be talking more about MOOC, and I'll be doing a webinar about MOOCs. And you have a MOOC project and a MOOC paper to write. So we'll be talking about more about that in a few sessions from now, a little bit later on. So as I mentioned, during the pandemic, these online study methods and these integrated social media platforms became extremely heavily used. So the MOOC courses, the online and hybrid courses, hybrid simply meaning that it was a combination of in-person and online, using mobile devices, phones and pads and iPads and tablets and things like that for other applications. The social media, Twitter, IMO, Facebook, Instagram, Telegram, and WhatsApp. I actually did some teaching for some students using WhatsApp, doing video teaching through WhatsApp with students during the pandemic. So these things have all really moved ahead tremendously in the last 2 to 3 years. Labs and study groups, online language groups, and language and conversation exchanges, all online, all being done through various platforms. So in the next class, I believe last night Anna Patricia started talking about the 4 language skills paper and that assignment. I believe she started talking about that, or perhaps Alham's going to talk about that tomorrow. I'm not really sure. I'd have to look up the schedule. But next week we're with me. We're going to start looking at conversation activities and how to design those, and you're going to be expected to do a demonstration in the webinar a few days from now, you'll be expected to do a demonstration of one of your conversation activities. And I do an assessment of it while you're giving this demonstration to your classmates here. I don't mark it. I just do an assessment. I do comments and then I email those comments to you so that you have that to help you and help guide you through the completion of your conversation activity assignment. So that's in the near future. And if you have questions related to the administration or the organization of the course or something to do with the course, you can email Simon Baker at that info@tesolcanada.org. That's the email address I put in the chat box a few moments ago. So
Sir,
that,
I have a question. Can I ask?
just give me a brief moment. I'm just going to stop the recording because I've finished with my material for tonight. So
All right, sir. All right,
that's the
sir.
end.
Sorry.
That's the end of the class for tonight. So I'm stopping the recording now.